everyone, Vincenzo Calla here with VCalla Productions. Today I'm sitting here with Michelle Ferreri, MP for Peterborough, Kawartha. We're going to talk about the human side of politics today, something that viewers know that I'm interested in. I care about it. Michelle knows about it. She cares about it. So thanks, Michelle, for welcoming me into your office here in Ottawa, and thanks for joining the VCalla Show.
Happy to be here. Thank you for thinking of me, and welcome to Ottawa.
Well, thanks.
Even though you're from here,
I'm
welcome
here.
to Parliament.
Well, it's funny how everybody gets amazed that I don't come to Parliament often, but I'm here now, so it works. So a bit of talking about the topic today. So there's two sides of politics. There's the side we see on TV. There's a TV right here, and I'm seeing the House of Commons right now. And you see that on CPAC and the news channels and that sort of thing. And then there's the side of like actually being there. And I was there today, and Michelle knows what I'm talking about. There's question period, and even outside of the House, there's a lot of negativity in politics. You know that. And there's another side, there's the human side of politics, which I've been focusing on, and I always try to do. And I want to talk about that today. Talk about the human side of politics and who these MPs are, and we are all human. So since your election, how have you dealt with some of the hate or toxicity that has been pointed towards you and your colleagues? How have you sort of dealt with that?
Well, I think I had a bit of an advantage coming in because of my background in sort of social media and public forum, right? So I did journalism before this, and then I did, social media as well, marketing and consulting. And so I had a lens of being under a spotlight prior to politics. And I had the lens of sort of people were, they feel like they have sort of ownership over you, which means they can say things about you. But it does go to another level when you're in politics because it's public service. So that means that you are hired by the people, right? And so they definitely feel a sense of ownership. And so there can be some pretty hateful, toxic vitriol online in particular, right? I never have it in person. It's really in social media that it mostly happens. And so I think once you recognize it really has very little to do with you, and you see that a lot of these people, this is kind of what has formed their identity, right? Like they've actually formed their identity around being that person, being a troll or being sort of a hateful person. And it's not really about me. It has nothing to do with me. And so once you realize that, it's a lot easier to sort of move forward and keep your eye on the prize, which is, trying to serve, trying to do the best that you can, and just, one step at a time.
So you have your own podcast called People Before Politics. And I want to know, what was your inspiration to do this podcast? And what has the response been?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, so I always interviewed people. It's what I love to do. It's probably my first love. I love stories, and I love learning about who people are. The best way to diffuse hate is a connection, right? So when you see somebody as a human instead of whatever label you've decided to give them. So if I know that Vincenzo is, likes politics and he's a high school student, and I can see like sort of maybe my own son in you, or I have some kind of connection, it really diffuses a lot of that. And so, and everybody has a story. Like this is what I loved about what I did prior to politics. I never ran out of ideas because every single person has something to share. And so People Before Politics was sort of what I campaigned on for my nomination, because politics is shaped by the people, right? And so the people's lived experiences, the people's, all of that shapes what their political ideology is. And so when we learn about who they are as humans and their, who they are as a person, we understand their politics a lot better. And it's able to sort of make it more relatable.
Well, and definitely, and you remember Top 10, that was the interview I did that I always try to do, like, what's your favorite movie? What's your favorite TV show? To show that we are all people, and you're another person, and you can be relatable because your favorite movie is whatever, or your favorite show, and like, oh, that's my favorite show too. Oh, look at that. I like pizza too, or whatever, something like that. And it's just so important. And I want to look a bit now, sort of this unseen side. Like we see question period and we see, heckling and like yelling and fighting and all that. But I want to ask you a bit about the side that we don't see, sort of the relationships you have with your peers, both in your party and on the other side of the house, outside of question period. What are those like? Like, what are the real relationships you have with, like, say, a Liberal MP or NDP MPs? What are those like?
That's a great question. And I think people don't see it. And I think it's interesting, right? You came to question period today, and I think the heckling, and a lot of people just say that's unbelievable. But I think you have to remember, like, there is a method to the madness. Like, I call it like the old big family yelling match, right? It's you're working out a lot of feelings and emotions in a very heated, often emotional environment, right? Like, things are very emotional at the time when we record this interview. There's a lot politically happening in the House. And so that's interesting. But relationships with other MPs, we work really closely with all other parties because we sit on committees with all different parties. And so committee work is really where a lot of big relationships are developed. And so I sit on Status of Women Committee. Status of Women Committee, I believe, is the only committee that has submitted as many reports, like the most reports in the House. We work exceptionally well together. We just came back from a tour together on human trafficking. And then yesterday, last night, when this is recorded, I did a take note debate on murdered and missing Indigenous girls and women and Red Dress Day, which is on May 5th. And it was in support of one of the members, Leah Gazan, who's Winnipeg Centre. And, Leah's NDP. And, Leah, had tears in her eyes last night. She came up, she gave me a big hug because she knows I'm like, you're the champion on this and we support you. So those are just like, that's just one example. But, I have a block member across the hall from me, and we get, we do a big kiss every day. Hello, how are you doing? And how are things? And, lots of Liberal MPs that you have to work with. And we all have, I think, there's a handful where there's maybe like a strong personality conflict where you don't really jive with people. But for the most part, there's an element of respect, right? You're in this arena together. And the only people who really understand the life of an MP is an MP, regardless of what political stripe you are.
And that's the unseen side of politics. I think I won't go on too much longer, but that's sort of a small glimpse into what Parliament is like. It's not what we see on TV. It's not what we see on Twitter. It's not what we see on social media. It's real life, and it's important to see this and to create a better path forward in politics. So thanks, Michelle, so much for joining me. It was really great having you again, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having me, Vincenzo. I really admire your thirst for knowledge and your critical thinking, and to dive a little bit deeper. Because not only do you care about policy, which you've shown you really do, you really want to understand what drives us, and I think that's really valuable. So thank you for what you do.
And it's important, and I'll leave this on a note for our next conversation. It's really important for our mental health too, because I know that's something you think is important, and that's something I find important. So we'll leave that for next time, okay? So 100%. The VCalla Show is a VCalla production. So until the next video, I'm Vincenzo Calla, signing out.